Okay, well, first of all, let's understand why we need to decarbonize electricity systems. So two quick reasons. Decarbonization of the electricity system, as we understand it, needs to go faster than any other sector. We need to get the CO2 out of the electricity system and get that down to zero carbon in order to meet our targets by around 2015. But at the same time, we need to actually expand the role of electricity in the energy system and get more electricity, which is a low carbon source at the point of use, into things like transport and also end uses like heating as well. And so the challenge of doing that really depends on where you are in the world, what type of electricity market and demand that you have. So I'll pick up maybe two things. And one is that if you're looking at the real challenge of getting electricity to the many millions of people that don't have energy access at the moment, and making sure that that is provided through low carbon sources, especially renewable energy, that's really a question of financing and making sure that the institutional structures are in place and that there is a strong investment case. Now, if we're talking about the more mature markets and the sort of the stable electricity grids in many countries, then one of the key issues around getting low carbon source onto the grid, especially the variability of renewable sources, is actually making sure that the markets are appropriate and flexible in order to integrate those sources at lowest cost and help the transition be as smooth as possible. The IEA has recently published a study that tries to look at all of the investments across the energy sector, from upstream oil and gas right down to end uses in transport and other parts of energy efficiency. And we looked at what was happening year over year in terms of investments in low carbon sources, and that's especially renewable energy. And what we found was actually that when we compare the investments today in renewable energy and the investments in renewables, are around 17% of all investments across the energy system. They're one of the key growing areas of investment around the world. Those investments actually are bringing online assets that are roughly on track with what we need in the next 5 years to be on a decarbonisation pathway. Some of the other low carbon sources, perhaps nuclear and CCS, are not on track. Those are not delivering in terms of the number of projects coming online that we see in our low-cost pathway towards a decarbonised energy system. And then when you go beyond 2020 and you look at renewables and nuclear and CCS in electricity terms, none of them are really matching up to where we need to be. We need to ramp up the scale of ambition in the 2020s to bring the investments in all of those on track. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be spending enormous amounts more money, because the good news is that especially for renewables, the costs are coming down. And we saw that for the same amount of investment invested in renewables in 2015, we were getting 33% more energy output from those assets compared to the same investment in 2012. Yeah, so the outcomes of the negotiations here, it's one of the big questions about how they're going, and frankly I'm not an expert on the climate negotiations or what's happening on other parts of the site here in terms of that. But with the great news of the entry into force of the Paris Agreement last week, we can hope that shows that there is a global collective ambition to tackle this problem, and that COP22 is an opportunity to begin putting in place the building blocks for what that actually means in terms of implementation. And the IEA as an organisation is really looking forward to working with countries on how to implement their policies in order to achieve the transition.